Welcome. So you said Chicago as well. So this is a good time zone to be giving the lectures in. I'm going to be letting people roll in while I do kind of a brief lecture in the beginning, and then we'll get started with the game and playing some games and fielding some USMLE style questions. So today the lecture is also going to be kind of pedagogical in terms of we have a lot of like early studying students that are participating like this week and last week in terms of their like prep, like how long they've been preparing for the USMLE exam, not for their medical journey, but for their like USMLE specific studying. And I just wanted to explain some things that I wish I knew when I first started studying for the Step 1 exam to feel less demoralized by the exam, and it kind of is a good segue to understanding why we're doing Borborygmi is doing what they're doing in terms of preparing for the USMLE in the style that we've designed it. So the first thing to keep in mind, I think, is that questions are going to be tertiary questions. So you can think of, are you guys able to see my whiteboard?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And so in order to answer a USMLE style question, you have to know like what, let's say that the thing that we're talking about is in the USA. You have to know that the thing that we're talking about tends to be in the Northeast. And I'll explain what this means in a second. And you have to know that the thing that we're talking about, let's say we're talking about a restaurant. So its most famous restaurant. And so what do I mean by this? So I'm just going to abbreviate it. No, I'll write the whole thing. So what do I mean by this? I mean, when you're doing your exam preparation, and then they have the question, which is created by the answer choices, right? And so in order to get this right, let's say that the correct answer is, the Katz Delicatessen in New York City. I'm Dr. Katz. And so in order to get this right, you have to know that the Katz Delicatessen is in the USA, that it's also in the Northeast region, that it's the most famous restaurant in the Northeast region. Let's say that was the case. And then from the answer choices, you'd have to identify which of the 5 answer choices was the most famous in the list. And so a lot of students will know these two. And they'll get the question wrong because they'll choose something like, McDonald's. And that causes them to feel demoralized and causes them to feel like they're not performing well in the exam. And so the idea preparing for the USMLE exam is that if you were to create a line chart where time was on the x-axis and preparation and the arduousness of preparing for the exam, let's say effort, was on the y-axis, they wind up getting demoralized because the time that they're spending, or I should say, not effort, but let's say performance. So let's say the time that they're spending preparing for the exam, this is their test date, is largely spent making incremental gains in terms of their score. Um, these are like, this is like a passing score, let's say. And they spend most of their time not passing. They spend most of their time learning, one fact. And each question they see, they know one fact about it, but it's not translating into a score because you need to know all three in order to get even 1 point or to improve your score even incrementally. That's one question. There's going to be 7 hours of questioning. And so the idea that you're only going to know one fact of the three that you need in order to get choose the right answer choice, let alone choosing the right answer choice. So it's really a four hurdles representing three facts. And so as they learn more and more and more, they don't see a translation in their score, and it becomes extremely debilitating. So the proportion of the time that they spend where they're passing is actually very slight, and then they meteorically rise in their score, such that they are passing and such that they are scoring well enough to get into an American residency. And so it's really good to understand that if you only know one answer, like that it's in the USA, you're still not going to be passing, right? And if you know two answers to the question, in other words, you know that it's in the Northeast, you're still not passing. It's only until you start really knowing three facts that are germane to the question at hand and you're connecting them correctly and appropriately, that you're going to start being, even in contention to get a question right and to start improving your score in a substantial way. And so the mass majority of people in India, for example, or Pakistan, for example, will graduate medical school, which is like a 6-year process, potentially, depending on where you are in the world. And then because most countries, you don't go to undergraduate before you go to medical school, you'd spend 6 years there. And so you wind up feeling very demoralized because a lot of people will spend 2 years after they graduate medical school, after 6 years, preparing for the USMLE exam. And it isn't until they start getting three of these questions right in English, in the language that may not be their native language, the language that they grew up speaking, it's very hard to start improving your score immediately. And so you're really not going to. And so it's really important not to, be sad and demoralized, because you are gaining in knowledge substantially. Your performance is not changing. If you were to make a graph for the amount that you were learning, it might be, more like this. And it gets even higher and higher as you go up, or it might even slump. It might be that you're learning a lot more in the beginning and then you slump because you know so much more. And so it's a lot harder for you to find things that you don't know to learn, but you're still not scoring very well because you need to put these three together and your percentage chance of getting all three of them in the same question is low. And so right at the end, you're really getting to the point where you're more likely to get 4 in a row than you are to get them wrong. And that's when your score really gets crazy, goes up, because your consistency on tertiary questions is much higher. And so I just wanted to explain that, and because a lot of people don't, when they're starting their medical education, USMLE preparation, I should say, they're already doctors, they already know a lot, they think they should be scoring really well, and it just doesn't work that way for the USMLE because, they have reworded things, they have histological descriptions that you wind up needing, which are like, in order to get a glioblastoma question right, you need to know that there's pseudopalisading, histology. So you might even know what glioblastoma looks like in Arabic or Hindu or Spanish, but you don't know how to describe it in English because they need you to know that they describe it as pseudopalisading. And what does pseudopalisading mean? Pseudopalisading means that it's like a French fortress with, wooden stakes that are carved into sharp points, used in the gate of a castle or a fortress to ward off enemies. They're making an analogy to something that is extremely obscure in English, and they're trying to teach you that as if it's a medically relevant thing for you to know as a doctor when you get to the States. And arguably, it would be if you were a pathologist, but it isn't necessarily something that you're going to come into the States knowing just because you speak English very, very well and you're very knowledgeable in medicine. And there's hundreds of things that you need to learn like this, which are absolutely, requirements for you to, you're obligated to learn these things in order to pass them, the exam. So being medically prepared is not going to be enough. And so I just wanted to explain that because people get demoralized and they think that they're not doing well, and nothing could be further from the case. They just need to continue. They need to get past this sad, you know, secondary questions and get into the third and quaternary questions, tertiary and quaternary question answering kind of mode, where their English is ready to tackle this, as well as their knowledge in terms of facts, which are not taught in clinical schools and things like that, outside of very elite institutions, will cover all of these things before you graduate. I don't think any medical school, actually, even in the States, will teach all of these things before you graduate. So that's my little lecture. I usually don't do kind of pedagogical lectures, but I think it's so appropriate to getting started and using Borborygmi. And we were just featured in a video on a YouTube channel called Santiago MD. And we're going to share that link at the end of the YouTube, kind of at the end of this recording. And appreciate if you'd like or comment or subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also like that video, because they're promoting us today. And so that kind of leads into what we are. We're borb.org, Borborygmi. And so the idea is not to be a primary resource or to be like UWorld. The idea is to be like a flint to the tinder, so to speak, and to motivate people to continue into this tertiary and quaternary area by socializing and gamifying their experience, and making it easier for them to continue on for hours and hours and hours. And then maybe the last 2 or 3 hours, you join a friend and you study vignette-style questions on our platform. So without further ado, I have this set up here. This is our game, Borborygmi. So this is the kind of landing screen here, and I'm gonna unmute it, play some music, and just make sure the video. Good. So we will get started here. So this is the loading screen. Can you guys hear me? Chala, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, Raul, you're here? Okay, I spoke to some of you earlier. Lav Kari, are you here? I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yep.
Okay, I'm just doing roll call. So where are you coming from, Lav?
I'm from India.
India. Okay, all right. You're the second person from India. So welcome to the. Are you? Have you been studying for Step 1 long?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I've been studying for about 6 months now.
Oh wow.
Kind of
Okay.
getting oriented to.
Great. So you're very welcome. I hope you enjoyed the lecture here. So.
Thank you.
And so I think I spoke to everyone else actually. So we'll get started. You're more than invited to participate in the questions and everything like that. Usually we turn videos on just so the video is more engaging and people can kind of who are watching YouTube and things like that can see it. It's one of the I don't charge anybody. I do these for free, and I'll be doing these for free for the foreseeable future every week for Step 1. So the only thing that we like to ask is if you could like and comment on the YouTube channel, and if you turn on your video, it really helps us to get the word out for the educational platform. So so we're gonna create a game here. We need to create a character in order to do that. So why don't I? So create a new character. Does anybody have a preference on what we should play here? Archer, we got a warrior. Nobody ever tells us what to play. Why don't we do Archer again, just because it's a more fun animation, things like that. I'm gonna name us. You should like and subscribe. So I made a character name, like and describe. And we'll do, since this is exam some USMLE step questions for step 1. We're going to go exam 1. And if nobody's signed into the website and is ready to do multiplayer for this, I don't think we have anybody who's ready for that. And so we will just head into solo mode here. Let's see. All right. So we have our character here, and so I'm just going to explain a little bit about how the game works. So we have our character here. We have our HP, and I'm going to hide this. Hide floating meeting controls. So here we have like a mini map. You see this symbol here. It represents where our character is on the map. And so if you were to click on the map, it'd tell you that on that tile there was a grassy plains here. And because we haven't navigated the map whatsoever, this is fog of war, suggesting that we don't know what is going to occur on that area. So if we were to move, we would use some of our action points, which are kind of in green here, to move. So you see how I lost kind of an action point here. Or if I move again, you'll see that I lost another one. So if I click on the map, now I see that there's a spider here, which is an enemy. Potentially, if it's going to attack me, it will be an enemy. And so what we need is to create spells. So I press Z, which is the hotkey, and I press U to add points to those attacks. And we're going to get into the USMLE. You'll see how this is related in a moment. So I hit 2 to add that to the action key slot, and then I hit 1 to add that to the action key slot. So then I hit Q to close any window. And one of my spells is to kick the spider. So you see in this log here, it's going to say, that I kicked it. So I click this tile here on the map, and I kicked it back. And then I'm going to press the 2 hotkey to attack it. Oh, okay, I killed it with a bow and arrow. So now I've used all of my action points. And so you can see I have viewer points to look around. So if I were to hope to move towards that spider and pick up items, I click on the tile again, and you can see how the viewer points will change. So if I were to click over here, another eye would close. And in order to open all of the eyes and move around the map, if I click on the map now, I don't have viewer points, so I can't do that. So now I need to answer a USMLE style question in order to earn action points by confidently, accurately, and quickly answering USMLE style questions. So Rowenda, who should we ask first? Do we have a name ready?
Yes, Rahul. Let's start with Rahul. Thank you.
Sure, sounds good.
Thank you. Okay, all right, let's do it. Okay, so do you want to read or should I? So we're gonna read a question.
Yeah.
You what?
Yeah. I can read.
Okay, let's do it. So is this loaded for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a 1-year-old boy is brought to the emergency department by his parents after he fell at home. His parents say that he was attempting to walk when he slipped and fell from a standing height. He was adopted from abroad at birth, so his family history is unknown. On presentation, he is found to have bilateral mid-shaft femur fractures. Physical exam shows a crying child with prominent choroidal veins and deformities of both legs. No burns, bruises, or abnormal injuries are noted otherwise. Skeletal survey reveals multiple fractures in various stages of healing. Which of the following is most likely responsible for this patient's symptoms?
Right. So what are you thinking about? What's your first?
This is osteogenesis imperfecta, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. So you're thinking this is potentially like a pathological fracture.
Yeah, because
right.
there's multiple.
All right. Okay. Reveals multiple fractures. Yeah. So osteogenesis imperfecta. So I'll let you choose an answer choice, and you can kind of we'll talk about it. So how confident are you, and which answer choices do you dislike, and which choices do you like?
Well, I just like C and D.
Okay.
Because I remember that it's related to the type 1 collagen defect.
Yeah.
I think it's a mutation. Sorry, I mean everything other than A, B, and E, I'd rule them out. I'd instead choose either C or D.
Oh, you would choose C or D. Okay.
Yeah.
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 So all right. So are there any other differentials you
Yeah.
considered, or were you thinking osteogenesis?
Right now,
Yeah.
well, yeah, it kind of it it kind of directed me towards it with the prominent choroidal veins and the leg deformities, and then the
Yeah.
bilateral femur fractures that and multiple fractures in various stages of healing. So that kind of I'm more inclined to choose mutation of collagen gene.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. How confident are you?
Um, if I'm being completely honest with you, it's been a while since I took step one, so I don't really know which one this is.
Oh, you've
But
taken
I
step
hope
one.
it's
You've
mutation.
taken step one already.
Yeah, I did. I
Ah,
did.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So
Yeah, it's been
so
a while.
do you want green, red, or yellow? Yeah, I could tell that you had thought a lot about this.
Yeah, I'd probably go with yellow.
Yellow. Okay, all right. I was thinking about
Yeah.
rickets and some other forms of, but let's see where we're going. So mutation collagen genes. So you're absolutely right. I think it's osteogenesis imperfecta as well. Um, so glycine, proline, lysine repeats. It's a type 3 amino acid turn. Yeah. So do you remember like the turn of the collagen is affected? I love that. So there's like glycine is a very small amino acid. If you remember from like MCAT, I don't know if you guys
Mm.
have something similar where you guys talk about and then proline is a kind of kinked amino acid, and so it turns, and so the type of collagen is type 1, and you're absolutely right. It's severe osteogenesis imperfecta. So what I've done is I've clicked on this correct answer choice. You earned us an action point, so we're able to move around. And so you go to the review question here, and it kind of gives you an explanation. And so if you look at like collagen forms a triple helix, and disruption of the helix leads to severe osteogenesis imperfecta. So did you have anything else to add, or things that you noticed about the question that got you to the answer?
Well, first thing, a 1-year-old boy, and he's having bilateral femur fractures after a small fall at home.
Yeah.
Especially the standing height, that kind of pushed me
Yeah.
towards the osteogenesis imperfecta. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then there were the prominent choroidal veins. And
Yeah.
if I'm not wrong, then osteogenesis imperfecta also you'd be able to see those like prominence of the veins.
Yeah. And you know, you have almost blue kind of tinting to the sclera,
Right,
and
exactly.
you
Yeah.
almost look like the characters from Dune, the science fiction movie and book. Very good book. So if you eat orange melange, you get blue eyes eventually in that story. So thank you so much, Raul. That was very. I didn't have much to
Thank you.
add because you did very well. I was thinking about rickets because one of the
Thank you.
answer choices was kind of suggesting rickets because it's bilateral, and so I just moved. I used an action point. It's showing up here, but it's bilateral, and you know you're right. Like the standing height's like one is a 1-year-old. So if they fall, they should not be breaking
Yeah,
bones. And think about pediatric bones is they don't break. They kind of bend. You get green stick fractures, but you don't get those big.
exactly.
Yeah, you don't get
Yeah.
those big hair fractures and things like that. So yeah, that's exactly right way to think about those questions. So it's a really nice way to go about systematically doing that. So you can see how much you need to know about a disorder that's not particularly difficult to like comprehend in terms of like, okay, well, collagen in the bone, type 1 collagen. So there's a mnemonic. Do you guys know it? Like type 1 is bone, type 2 is cartilage. So 1
Cartilage,
is in the word bone, cartilage, and then type 3 is in the basement membrane. And
basement.
sorry, yeah. Type 3 is healing, and then type 4 is on the floor, so it's basement membrane. Um,
Mm.
but so Rowenda, who do we who's the next name here?
Sure. Uh, Chala. Hi, Chala.
Hello, Chala. All right.
Hope the internet connection is good.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, good. Okay. So let me know. Would you like to read it or should I?
Uh, I'm not seeing anything.
Oh,
I
okay.
think there is still a connection problem.
Okay,
missing
I'll read it,
questions.
and if you get to the point where by the time I've read it you were able to read it yourself, then we'll discuss it. And otherwise, I'll kind of go through it, and when you have something to say, or if the audio is not coming through, then you can just type it in, and I'll read out what you say. Sometimes it's a little better for the connection for some people. So I appreciate your coming twice. So I'm gonna definitely try to make it easy for you to come generally, even if your connection's not doing well. So a 1-month-old boy is brought to the emergency department by his parents for recent episodes of non-bilious projectile vomiting, non-bilious, and refusal to eat. So the boy has no problem with passing meconium or eating at birth. He only started having these episodes at 3 weeks old. And further history reveals that the patient is a firstborn male, and that the boy's mother was treated with erythromycin, and the infection had an infection late in the 3rd trimester. And so physical exam reveals a palpable mass in the epigastrium. So which of the following mechanisms is likely responsible for this patient's disorder? So we're asking, what is the mechanism that is responsible for this patient's disorder? And so we have a 1-month-old boy, projectile vomiting, non-bilious. So what are you thinking about, Chala, if your connection's okay?
Okay, I think this patient is, as you said, 1-month-old boy and presented with a recent episode of non-bilious projectile vomiting. I think it could be hypertrophy of smooth muscle or pylorus. I think so.
Yeah. So like hyperplasia of the pyloric sphincter would be kind of result in projectile type vomiting, you're thinking. Is that weird?
Yeah.
And when does it usually present? Does it usually present around 1 month or right away? It usually takes a while because the pathophysiology of this is really good. Like go to Pathoma and the pathophysiology of these GI kind of questions, because it takes a while because you have to get kind of like hyperplasia, and you have to get like growth of the pylorus in the stomach. The stomach is kind of like this kind of bean shaped organ that at the end of it is a sphincter to unload the contents of the stomach into the duodenum in the intestines. And so sometimes on occasion the sphincter of the pylorus can develop kind of a decrease in the caliber of the lumen that allows food to pass through it. And so it does cause non-bilious projectile vomiting because it's before the duodenum, right? And so it takes about a month to develop. So that's good timing, I guess. Their description of that would be good for. So which answer choices were you thinking about? Which would you say you don't like?
Yeah, I am looking at the choice now. A, intestinal vascular accident. I don't choose that one.
Yeah.
I don't go with intestinal vascular accident. So I rule out that one. And B1, pancreatic fusion abnormality. Less likely again.
Okay. Pancreatic, yeah. So yeah, they're getting at like maybe yeah. So I'll let you answer, and then we'll talk about it. So pancreatic fusion abnormality, and then we have hypertrophy of smooth muscle. Then we have neural crest cell migration failure. What does that kind of refer to? Do you know? So that kind of refers to Down syndrome. So that's the pathophysiology. This is yeah. So you get double bubble sign from duodenal atresia. So welcome, Reedy. We're just in the middle of a question here, and I think Chala's answering. You're very welcome. I'll talk to you in a moment. So defective lumen recanalization. So choose one, and we'll talk about it. How, which one are you thinking?
I will go with E,
Okay.
Defect of lumen recanalization.
Okay. Which confidence do you want?
Yellow.
All right, let's do it. All right, so it's hypertrophy. I said hyperplasia, and I should have said hypertrophy. So this is pyloric stenosis. You're absolutely right. So you diagnose it. This is a perfect example of what I was talking about before, where you're knowledgeable and you understand the pathology, but they want you to have specific knowledge on a pathology that until you take the USMLE exam, you might be unlikely to have been explored in some, in many areas the way that they want you to. And so it's a very demoralizing exam. So non-bilious vomiting in the sense that you can't really use the fact that you're kind of a good practicing doctor to necessarily do well on the step 1 exam, So you have pyloric smooth muscle hypertrophy can be felt as an olive-sized mass in the epigastrium. That's usually what they'll describe, is that when they palpate the abdomen, that you'll feel this like olive-sized mass. And the projectile vomiting is, until further notice, if you have projectile vomiting that is non-bilious, it is going to be pyloric stenosis. And the pathophysiology of that is one of the sphincter, which is construed of circular muscle. So remember that the circular muscle will contract like a sphincter, and the longitudinal muscle will have peristalsis to kind of move it along the GI tract and allow it to travel along the GI tract longitudinally. Thank you, Chala. I think also erythromycin. Something interesting about erythromycin is that it increases gut motility. It's a strange drug that way. And I'm not sure if they're going to mention the explanation as to what was significant about that. Exposure to macrolides, both, which of the following is seen in this case. The risk factors for pyloric stenosis is being a firstborn male and exposure to macrolides. So the macrolides are azithromycin, chlorothromycin, and erythromycin are all macrolides. And actually, erythromycin in particular is particularly implicated in pyloric stenosis risk of development for pyloric stenosis, as taken by the mother, right? So the mother took it. So thank you, Chala. Is that helpful? I don't know, but thank you so much. We ask questions at random. So sometimes you go twice in a row. Sometimes you wait for everybody. So absolutely, thank you, Chala. You'll get another shot as well as we go along. So Rowenda, do we have another name? By the way, I get questions wrong as we go. Like I will guaranteed get at least one question wrong while we're doing this. So don't be shy and definitely volunteer to do a question, because it helps you to remember. So, Rowenda, who should we do next? Do you think?
Yes. Ume.
Okay. Hello, Ume.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. All right. So would you like to read, or should I read?
I will read.
Okay, let's do it. All right. Let me know when you can see it.
Yeah. Okay. A 19-year-old man returns from travel in South America. He presents complaining to profuse watery diarrhea. The suspect the causative organism to be endogenous Escherichia coli, which is the mechanism by which this organism causes diarrhea.
All right. So what are you thinking currently?
I cannot see the answers. It's really so small to see.
Okay. Let me read some of them to you. So like first step, like this is an infectious disease question.
Yeah.
And so, do you know? Have you studied very much enterotoxigenic E. coli?
Yeah, I have studied.
Okay. And so because sometimes I ask, because the way that we will rule these answer questions out will be different if you know a lot about it than if you just are trying to rule answer choices out, which is perfectly reasonable. If you don't know a lot about a subject, you can go into this thinking, I'm gonna find the right answer even though I don't know the answer. I'm not saying that you don't. So let's look into this. So blocks the release of inhibitory neurotransmitters GABA and glycine.
No,
That,
it's not dancing.
okay. So I'm going to rule these out as we go, which is going to contribute to your time here. But so blocks the presynaptic release of acetylcholine in neuromuscular junction.
No.
No. Okay. So what do these two represent?
GABA actually is from neural cushion. GABA neuro inhibitory GABA and glycine.
So what kind of inhibitory what would inhibit the neurotransmitters GABA and glycine, for example, in terms of the release of GABA and glycine? So there are interneurons in your spine which determine that are inhibitory, and so they release GABA and glycine. But because they're upper motor neurons, when you inhibit an upper motor neuron, you're disinhibiting. You're potentially you're depending on which neuron. This is an inhibitory. This is an interneuron. So you're not thinking of it that way. You're thinking this is going to be inhibiting GABA and glycine. And so there are snare proteins. So this would be like if you inhibit an upper motor neuron, then you might have spastic paralysis or spasms where your muscles really contract more often. And so there are snare proteins which allow the vesicular release of acetylcholine, which is the neurotransmitter that allows muscles to contract. And so this would be like similar to like tetanus. Botulinum toxin also works on the snare proteins, but it does it in a different way. And then this one, presynaptic acetylcholine. Do you know what this one's about?
Acetylcholine and neurotransmitter junction.
Yeah.
In case of
blocking the presynaptic side.
Yes, it is in case of Parkinson's disease.
Yeah. So in Parkinson's disease, that's exactly right. So in Parkinson's disease, you do have in the pars compacta of the basal ganglia, you'll see the substantia nigra will be you'll have like a loss of cells there, death of cells or demyelination, not demyelination, but death of cells as a result of Parkinsonism, and then you will not have the acetylcholine release there. But this is in the neuromuscular junction.
Yeah.
And so this is not in the central nervous system. So you'll see this if you have like a if you had Lambert-Eaton, which are antibodies against the presynaptic side. But it's preventing the release of acetylcholine. So this would be like preventing the release of it might be something like botulinum toxin. So that those would all be snare proteins.
Sorry to interrupt, but
that be
Lambert-Eaton for presynaptic calcium channels and myasthenia is for the acetylcholine?
Yeah. So sorry if I understood the question correctly. You're saying is Lambert-Eaton presynaptic or postsynaptic? Is that right?
No, Lambert-Eaton is for the calcium channels and myasthenia is for the acetylcholine channels, right? If I remember correctly, I don't know.
Yeah. So there's several differences between myasthenia and Lambert-Eaton, but they're both basically the idea is that the paraneoplasm that is Lambert-Eaton is associated with small cell carcinoma, and it's going to be presynaptic. So I think of them. So there's two neurons. There's a neuron that's presynaptic that's going to be the release, and you're absolutely right. It has to do with calcium channels. So when you attack the calcium channels, you decrease. So calcium channels are actually the calcium channels allow the flow of calcium into the presynaptic side, which then is the electrochemical gradient that determines the voltage that would permit the snare proteins to release calcium. To release a vesicle, I should say. So calcium mediates the release of vesicles, and so Lambert-Eaton attacks those calcium channels and prevents the release of acetylcholine. And so And so it works in a similar way to botulinum toxin, except botulinum toxin actually is damaging, is like inhibiting the snare proteins themselves. And then myasthenia gravis works on the other neuron, which is the postsynaptic neuron, to prevent the binding of acetylcholine to that postsynaptic neuron, preventing the threshold potential for firing. And so with myasthenia gravis, for example, with lots of activity, you get a decrease in strength and contractility in those muscles. But with increased activity with Lambert-Eaton, you actually get stronger because you're increasing the amount of calcium that does wind up getting into the presynaptic side, and you wind up getting more vesicular release of acetylcholine, which is the problem. So, is that what you were getting at? Were you, with that question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So so inactivates mammalian 60. Yeah, Ume. So we're looking for enterogenic E. coli as the causative agent. So which of these three would you choose as representative of that? Are you thinking?
I'm sorry, it's stimulus adenyl cyclase, increasing cyclic AMP.
Yeah. So it's cyclic AMP and not cyclic GMP, right?
Sorry.
So how confident are you?
I think it's
Yellow, green, or red, you thinking?
green.
Green. Okay, all right, let's do it. All right, so you're correct. So good job, Ume. So this would be Shiga-like toxin, would be the 60S ribosomal subunit. So there are several like subunits to the ribosome. Ribosomes take RNA and make proteins, and so there is a ribosomal subunit specifically on Shiga. The mammalian 60S ribosomal subunit, Shiga toxin will actually inactivate that. So that's the mechanism of action of Shiga toxin, which is very similar to EHEC, which is entero. It's HEC is has to do with a different strain of E. coli, and so this is ETEC, and so it's a different pathology because EHEC would cause bloody diarrhea, and we didn't. And so this is heat labile toxin, stimulates adenylate cyclase, increases level of cyclic AMP. So great job. So these represent, so stimulates release of cytokines. That was pyrogenic exotoxins, release cytokines causing rash, fever, and toxigenic shock. That would be like Staph aureus and Staph epidermidis. Yeah. All right, so we got plenty of people here. We're gonna get to everybody though. So thank you so much, Ume. Good job. So we have some action points here that we've earned. So I'm gonna move towards this short sword. Actually, I'm gonna move towards this spider and search. Now that I'm standing over them, I can try to eat, and we're gonna need food throughout the way. So I'm gonna get some of this beef that I got. It shouldn't be called beef. It should be called meat. And I'm pretty sure you're not gonna be able to eat spiders later on. So. But I think currently we can. So if we go to our inventory, we see that we have some water here. And if we look at our health, we have our hunger is 6, 3, and our thirst is 6. So I'm going to drink some water, and we'll keep going here. So Rowenda, who's next in line here?
Right. Hi, Muhammad.
Mohammed. All right. Are you here, Mohammed? So we might get the mic working a little bit. Are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So would you like to read, or should I read?
Yeah, I will read.
Okay, all right. I'll let me know when you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes.
All right. So feel free to read out loud, or I can do it if you like.
Hey, Dr. Kat,
s-
sorry to interrupt. I'm
Yes.
having a little bit of an emergency. I'll get back in a bit.
Okay, no problem. I'll see you
See-
soon. So, Mohammed,
yes.
take it from here if you like.
A 33-year-old woman presents to her physician's office for postpartum checkup. She gave birth to a 38-week-old boy via an uncomplicated vaginal delivery 3 weeks ago and has been excessively breastfeeding her son. The hormone most responsible for promoting milk let down during lactation. And this new mother would lead to the greatest challenge in the level of which was the following factors.
Okay. So, what are you thinking about?
Psychology,
What kind of knowledge is this? What are we thinking about?
just started use mill, so just difficult.
Ah, okay. Okay, no problem, no problem. So, where are you coming from, Mohammed?
From Egypt.
From Egypt. Okay, welcome, welcome. I haven't been to Egypt. I wanted to go for a long time. I want to go to Alexandria.
You'd be welcomed.
Yes, yes. So you're very welcome too, so I will. I'll ask you some questions. We were talking about this. So when you don't know when you don't necessarily haven't seen subject matter or something like that, it happens all the time on the USMLE, even when you're taking your exam, the real thing. And so it's good to develop strategies as you go along to answer questions that you don't know the answer to. So I'm going to ask you some component questions of this larger question, which requires like several answers. That's kind of the theme of today. But so what hormone do you think is responsible for like promoting milk letdown?
Milk let down?
Letdown, yeah.
Which, yeah, can't remember.
Yeah, actually, I'm having trouble because I think prolactin is the hormone that would be responsible for the production of milk. But milk letdown, it might be oxytocin. I'm not sure. I know that the secretion of milk is mediated, and during delivery, the production, the oxytocin will kind of stimulate the production. But let's think more broadly about this. So postpartum, right? After you have a child, postpartum means that you just had a baby, right? And
Yes.
so this is a mother who is having has just had a child 3 weeks ago, and then a hormone that promotes milk letdown is going to lead to a change in one of these factors. So I have to say, this is a great example of a question where I don't know the answer, and I don't want to teach. I don't want to teach information that I'm not well aware of. This is one of those questions that hits me in a place where I need to study more about it. But I'll tell you this: we can use some study strategies, right? I know that
Yes.
IP3 and phosphorylase, so phospholipase A, right, is going to lead to changes in cyclic AMP. I know that. So if you have a change in phospholipase A, that's going to be a long-term change, but cyclic AMP goes up and down. So I would never choose phospholipase A because it's part of the pathway that cleaves AMP, adenosine monophosphate, to become cyclic AMP. So I would never choose D. So I'm going to rule out D, right? I don't know the answer. I don't even know the hormone that we're necessarily discussing in terms of letdown. I need to just be refreshed on that. So IP3 is also involved in that process. I don't think it goes up and down particularly quickly. RAS is not involved in that process. And I don't think of it as being a thing that we mediate very much up or down. So cyclic GMP, we do see go up and down quite a bit on the basis of regulation. So I think it's really between A and C and E in my mind, right? So that's how I'm doing it. I'm ruling out a bunch first, and then I'm ruling in. I think cyclic AMP is more common. So I ruled out, right? So I ruled out answer choices I didn't like. RAS is less discussed than cyclic AMP and cyclic GMP, although it's a very commonly discussed molecular pathway. That these are all very high yield and very important to know. But because it's been a while since step one, I'm not sure what the milk letdown hormone is, so I'm not sure which of these pathways corresponds to our hormone. So that's okay, because now I have a 50% chance of getting it right, potentially, if I'm correct in my assumptions, which I may not be. And cyclic GMP is less commonly tested than cyclic AMP because more pathways use cyclic AMP than cyclic GMP. It could be any of these answers. I don't like these two, C and D, as much as RAS. So I could be wrong. So which one do you want to go with? And we'll read the explanation. How about that?
Maybe I would go with cyclic AMP.
AMP?
I would go with cyclic AMP.
Okay. How confident do we want to be?
Not very much. I would
Yeah.
yellow.
Yeah, I would say red, maybe. Let's do red.
Okay, red.
Okay. All right, so it's IP3. So I'm wrong. I'm wrong, and we shouldn't think that way. So let's try to fix it. So oxytocin, I was right about oxytocin. So I should have been thinking about oxytocin, and I wasn't. So it's a G protein coupled receptor, meaning it has 5 transmembrane components, and there's all of these parts to the pathway that you need to remember, including phospholipase C, which affects DAG and IP3. So you remember phospholipase C will affect your secondary messengers. Your secondary messengers are the things that follow this like cascade, which and signal all around. So the whole point of G coupled receptors is that they amplify and they activate one another, and they wind up having an enormous effect on the body. And so DAG and IP3 are kind of component changes when you have phospholipase C, which is oxytocin affects phospholipase C. So there's a page in your first aid that explains which hormones affect which pathways, and you cannot take the exam before you read that. You have to be able to write that entire page. I know that it's a pain because it's not particularly clinical, and nobody memorizes it before they take the USMLE exam, and a lot of people forget it as soon as they do. But you need to, for the step 1 exam, memorize all of the hormone pathways, molecular pathways. So because different drugs will affect different pathways, it's not totally ridiculous to learn it if you're going to be in internal medicine or family medicine and things like that. And the interactions of drugs will be affected by these drugs. So almost any profession in medicine will involve drugs that use these pathways and have contraindications because they affect pathways they don't intend, on the basis of things like this. And so we're talking about oxytocin. So it's G-coupled receptor with phospholipase is the type of G-coupled receptor that we're going to, phospholipase C, and it's going to cleave DAG and IP3. So you just have to look at those pathways on first aid and memorize them. And there's a visual that you need to get. And I suggest writing them out. That's the best way to memorize them, is to write them out a few thousand times, and then and every time you see a question with something like this, you should attempt to memorize the entire sheet, because it is not a waste of your time. You will need to memorize it before you take the exam, so it is never a waste of time to memorize something that you need to memorize before you take the exam, if that makes sense. So so thank you, Mohammed. I think we both got that question wrong together. So hopefully we'll get redemption and get to answer another question. So thank you for coming. So Rowenda, who's next in line here?
Love Kari. Hi.
All right, Lakari.
Yeah, it's your turn.
Hello. Okay.
All right, are we pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so Lavkari, sorry. I remember your first name and not your last name. So would you like to read, or should I?
I'll read, no problem.
Okay. Oh, we got a short one here.
Okay, researchers tracing the fate of C-peptide, a product of pre-pro-insulin cleavage. Which of the following is a true statement regarding the fate of C-peptide? Well, as far as I remember, C-peptide is something that has to do with the secretion of insulin. Okay, anyway, let me just see the options. So it's which of the following is a true statement regarding the fate of C-peptide? Okay, C-peptide activates an intracellular signaling cascade. C-peptide exits the cells via protein channel. C-peptide is immediately degraded by the proteasome. C-peptide is packaged with insulin. In secretory vesicles, C-peptide is further cleaved into insulin. Okay, so as far as I remember, I've seen this somewhere where, you find these cases of these patients who just want a doctor's attention, so they intentionally inject themselves with insulin. And the only way you can find out if this is intentional is because of something like this, like you're able to detect the C-peptide. Otherwise, they're just diabetic or something. So I would go with, is with insulin and secretaries. C-peptide is further cleaved. I think option E, but I'm not really sure. This is kind of like very foggy in my mind.
Okay.
So
let me.
option.
Can I talk to you about it a little bit?
Yeah.
Or do you want to answer first? And so you're thinking E. So we'll talk about it. But so first of all, let me just comment on the strategy that you've used already, because I really like the way that you're answering this question. So the first thing you're doing is you're saying we're talking about insulin. And then you said what you knew about insulin to frame how you're going to read the answer choices. And so you knew that there were times when people would be factitiously injecting themselves with insulin, and that they use C-peptide to determine whether that person is factitiously injecting themselves, like a nurse or a healthcare worker might inject themselves with insulin. And so a person who has injected themselves with insulin might have C-peptide or might not have C-peptide on the basis of whether they are receiving insulin that is synthetic or producing insulin in their body, right?
Yeah.
And so you're like on the right track. You're ruling out answer choices. You're ruling in answer choices, and you're talking about what you know. Is awesome way to answer the question. So you talk about C-peptide is further cleaved into insulin. So what do you like about that answer choice, and what is giving you pause in terms of being like 100%?
Well, based on what I just said, see, I'm not exactly sure about it. It's not 100%. So based upon what I thought of what I remember, the factitious thing. So what that told me, I think it was Pathoma. I don't remember exactly that. That basically told me that C-peptide has something to do with the metabolism of insulin naturally, of course, not not synthetically, naturally. So I thought, okay, in that case, like option E says that C-peptide is further cleaved into insulin, so whereby you have two products, So I just randomly went onto that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little foggy with me, but the other options, like let's say option D, C-peptide is packaged with insulin and secretory vesicles. I don't think so. I don't think I've seen that anywhere. C-peptide, option C, C-peptide is immediately degraded by the proteasome. Well, if that were true, then we wouldn't be able to see them as two separate entities based on the knowledge that I have. So that's out. So yeah, option B, C-peptide exits the cells via protein channel. I've never seen that anywhere, so I'm not going with that because I have never seen that anywhere. C-peptide, option A, C-peptide activates an intracellular signaling cascade. No, I've never seen that anywhere. So there's ligand-gated, there's G-protein, there's all these other kinds of things, GQ, GIGS. I've never seen C-peptide doing anything to. Yeah. So I've never seen C-peptide interacting with signaling cascades anywhere. Right. So I'm not going with that either. So based on that, I would go with E.
Okay, I love it. Those are really good thoughts. I think the immediately degraded by proteasome is a great point, because if you're injecting yourself with insulin, you're not going to have C protein. But if you are producing it yourself, you certainly will want to have it in the blood to detect by the test. And so the test won't pick it up if it's degraded naturally. So I think it's a protein that's attached to insulin. It's not insulin itself. And so further cleaved into insulin, I think is one way to put it, but the wording is a little bit strange to me. So that's part of why I was thinking about D, because I think they would be in the same secretory vesicles if they're released. The question is, are they released vesicularly or are they just released as is? And so if you look at that like potassium mediated insulin release in beta islet cells in the pancreas chart, I think we could get to the bottom of it. But so which so you said E, and so which confidence would you like?
Yellow.
Yellow. Okay, let's do it. So we'll do
Yeah,
E.
because I'm not entirely sure. If I was entirely sure, I would go with green. So,
Yeah. I think this is great reasoning. So we'll give it a shot here. All right. So I think we're thinking D, but the reasoning was very, very, very sound. You knew a lot about it. You knew what they were getting. Really, you knew the learning objective for the entire question. And then right at the end, they give you another question. Is this
Yes.
vesicularly released? Okay. So it's really a very nuanced question. It's exactly the style of the USMLE exam, unfortunately. But you can see how much you can know about something and still be subject to the way that they ask the question. So, so C protein. So it is vesicularly released, and because of that, you would know if you knew that it was vesicularly released. I think you would have said that it's probably packaged together because it is the cleavage of C peptide from insulin that they detect C peptide alone as a remnant of what used to be insulin and C peptide together, released into the blood naturally, endogenously. If you had a healthcare worker that was injecting themselves with insulin, you wouldn't have that, and so it's great reasoning. We just I think next time you're not susceptible to this question anymore. You'll get it correct, 100%. So thank you, Lav. Rowenda, do we have another person ready?
Yeah. Chala. Let's go back to
okay.
Chala.
All right, so we are going randomly. So every once in a while we go back to people that we've seen before. So everybody can be ready to answer the next question and be cognizant of the fact that they might be on the stage anytime. So Chala, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Okay. Would you like to read again?
No, I am not seeing. Just read and let me listen. I will respond.
Okay. I'll read here. So
It is not appearing.
can you see it? Okay.
Yeah, now it is available. Let me read.
Okay.
A scientist is working on creating synthetic hemoglobin that can be used to replace blood loss in humans. She therefore starts to study the behavior of this artificial hemoglobin in terms of its ability to bind oxygen. She begins measuring the affinity between this synthetic hemoglobin and the oxygen in purified system before introducing modification to this system. Specifically, she reduces the level of carbon dioxide in the system to mimic conditions within the lungs and plots an affinity curve. Which of the following should be observed in this artificial hemoglobin if it mimics the behavior of normal hemoglobin? Okay, A, left shifted curve and decreased oxygen binding. B, right shifted curve and decreased oxygen binding. C, left shifted curve and increased oxygen binding. D, no shift in the curve and increased oxygen binding. E, right shifted curve and increased oxygen binding.
Yeah. So what are you thinking about? What is your first kind of thought when you read this? What category of knowledge is it? This has to do with the binding curve. There's a page in your first aid that would kind of explain the behavior of of oxygen binding hemoglobin and the increased affinity per oxygen of oxygen to hemoglobin. So as hemoglobin binds oxygen, it has a higher affinity to oxygen for the remaining hemoglobin subunits than each of them had without any of the hemoglobin subunits binding oxygen. So the first hemoglobin that binds oxygen makes it easier for the next hemoglobin to bind oxygen. And so the curve looks like a steep curve at first, and then kind of levels out at the top because it's becoming saturated. But it really steeply increases from kind of a flat curve to a really sharp curve and kind of bell curves out until it flattens. And so if you were to shift it to the right, would you have an increased affinity or a decreased affinity of oxygen to hemoglobin?
Increased.
Increased. So this is the sign. This is like the question that people sign flip the most. But if you left shift, if you were to take, in other words, what left shift means is you're moving the entire chart, like the data from the chart, to the left on the chart. So what you have in the x-axis, you have oxygen. You have like time, right? And then in the y-axis, you have oxygen binding. So would it be left shifted or right shifted if you had more oxygen binding per time? Meaning in a shorter period of time, you have more oxygen binding. Would you move the data to the right or to the left? Would you say? So if you move the data to the left, you'd have, in a shorter period of time, you'd have more oxygen binding, right? Are you there?
Sorry?
So if you move the data to the left, you'd have more oxygen binding, right? So that's what we mean by left shift. Does that make sense? I should show you a chart, and I think there may be a visual chart. So what we'll do is we'll talk about it a little bit. So I'll get you to choose an answer choice because I think it's probably going to show you the diffusion curve. Otherwise, I'm just going to draw it. So what are you thinking in terms of answer choices here?
I'm not sure, but I will go for E. Right shifted curve with and increased oxygen binding.
Right shift curve. Okay. And so which color do you want to go with?
Yellow.
Yellow. Okay. Because are you thinking that the oxygen affinity is? Are you thinking that the oxygen binding to hemoglobin is increased or decreased in the artificial hemoglobin?
Increased.
Increased. Okay. Yeah. So yellow. That's right. Okay. So it's left. Okay. So it's left shifted. So it's just a sign. It's just a sign flip that we're talking about. So so if you were to take the data and you were to shift it closer here, then the amount of oxygen that would be binding per time would be so if you were to take the data and move it to the left, then you'd have more oxygen binding per time, if that makes sense. Because the duration is the x-axis, you would see less time before you had more oxygen affinity, if that makes sense. More oxygen binding. So what I'll do is I'll actually, really quick, I will...
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is basically a synthetic hemoglobin which is supposed to reflect normal hemoglobin, right? And based on the chart that we have, which gives us an S curve, wherein your left side is more oxygen binding and the more you go towards the right, therefore you have less oxygen binding.
Right.
So in the options, we have left-sided with more oxygen binding, which is correct, and normal hemoglobin curve right-sided and less oxygen binding is also correct. So why do we only pick the left side with more oxygen binding? Because the right side with less oxygen binding is also correct, right? I mean, if you get what I'm trying
I
to
don't
say.
understand. So what you're saying about right-sided oxygen binding also being correct, I
Is
don't
decreased.
understand yet. So could you
Yeah,
flesh
so
that out?
there's an option which says right-sided with decreased oxygen binding.
Ah,
If you could just check.
so
Yeah,
so
so even normal hemoglobin, because it's an S curve, when you're in the left, it's left-sided with more oxygen binding, but when you're in the right, it's right side with decreased oxygen binding, right? Even for normal. So why is that wrong?
right.
Why is that option wrong?
Behavior. So artificial hemoglobin. So so I guess they're saying which of the following should be observed in this artificial hemoglobin if it mimics the behavior of normal hemoglobin. But they're specifically
Yes.
saying that she reduces the level of carbon dioxide in the system to mimic conditions within the lungs. And so
Okay.
so what
Got it.
happens when so that's why.
I
So
got it. Yeah.
you have a thin alveolar membrane and you have the arterial wall here where the blood is going to be and the hemoglobin is going to be within the red blood cells. So within the blood. And so when you have increased CO2, you have an inverse relationship between the amount of CO2 that you have, which is instantaneously crossing the membrane of the alveoli and into the blood, to the oxygen. So you could draw this mathematically by, it's quote unquote mathematically, by saying that the proportion of CO2 partial pressure is going to be increased when the partial pressure of oxygen is decreased. And so you would expect that it would be left shifted if you decrease the CO2, because inversely, if CO2 is decreased, you're going to have a proportionate increase in oxygen diffusion and respiration for oxygen in the hemoglobin of the blood that's near that alveoli. And so when you're thinking more oxygen, so I know you know that. This is another situation like you have all the knowledge in the world to get this question right.
Yeah, I missed that point. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
And that's what they're doing. They're trying
It's
to
like
get
I
you.
got 3 out of the 4 points and I missed the 4th point and so I bombed it.
Yeah. So this
So,
this is the perfect day for us to go over that tertiary kind of idea about how they try to mess you up, because they're they are getting you to be a good test taker, and so they're getting you to so you want to be like four questions in a row to start getting a decent score on the USMLE, and you're probably scoring decently anyway already, but in order to get like a score that you want, you need to be getting like 5 questions in a row, 4 questions in a row, 6 questions in a row to get any points at all, to get any credit on this exam. But the idea is that increased oxygen binding. I'm dysgraphic here, so binding is going to hemoglobin is going to so everybody should know that there's 4 subunits of hemoglobin, and there's this cooperative, they call it cooperativity. So they have they have beta hemoglobin and they have alpha hemoglobin, and this has to do with thalassemias and all of that. But if you have oxygen binds to it, so you have oxygen here, oxygen here. If oxygen binds to it, it becomes more likely that more oxygen is going to bind, right? And so if the increased partial pressure of oxygen increases, you're going to have more binding. And so the sooner that this happens in terms of time, right? This is your time axis. You got to think about it as this is duration. So this is the amount of time that has transpired. And so if you decrease the amount of time here, then your graph is going to look something like this. You're going to be like here. And so how much O2 oxygen binding are you going to have earlier? For a shorter period of time, you're going to have more oxygen binding to hemoglobin. And so it will be left shifted. This is your left shift, and this is your right shift. And so does that make sense? And so, Chala, are you still with me? We have some connection errors sometimes, so you
Yeah.
there? Chala's lost, huh?
He said connection still disturbing.
Yeah. Okay, that's all right. We've had some problems with
He will
connections
try
for
to
Chala.
rejoin.
Yeah. So you're very welcome to rejoin, and we'll talk about this. And you can always watch the video. So I'm just going to keep going. But so that's why you left shift. It's because the CO2 goes down proportionately. The partial pressure of oxygen will go up. If you know that, then the affinity will go up. Then the amount of oxygen that's going to hit the hemoglobin will increase because the partial pressure is increased. And you will see a left shift if that's the case, because more oxygen binding to hemoglobin is going to left shift. If we couldn't bind to hemoglobin, if we had something like carbon monoxide poisoning, that wouldn't be true. But with this change in the type of hemoglobin that we have and an increase, this synthetic hemoglobin is very similar to like fetal hemoglobin, which has like gamma subunits, which have a higher affinity to oxygen. And so it's really talking about fetal hemoglobin without talking about fetal hemoglobin. So, so they might even talk about that a little bit in the answer choice here. For example, in the lungs, oxygen dissociation curve. Haldane effect, you guys know the Haldane effect, where you decrease CO2, you have an increased affinity to oxygen. That's what they're getting at. It actually talks about H+. So if you have an increase in H+, you have a decrease of CO2 affinity. But CO2 is correspondent because of the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. When you decrease CO2, you decrease H+. So I know this is a really complicated concept and topic. I recommend understanding this really thoroughly because, like Lav was talking about, unless you really, think deeply about that question, all of the things that you know will not translate to getting a good score necessarily. So it's a really good topic. Physiology is the most high yield topic in the USMLE. Physiology, the more physiology you study, the better. So Rowenda, who do we have next? I know we don't have that many more people who aren't having connection issues today.
Yeah, we may have internet connection. I mean, poor internet connection as well. So we only have Lav.
Okay, Lav. Do you want to keep us going, Lav? We can answer another one if you like.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, all right, let's do it. So I'll let you read here again.
Okay, I'll do my best.
All right.
Okay, 32-year-old man presents to his primary care provider. By the way, I have a question. So I read somewhere about test-taking strategies. So they say that since the USMLE is designed in a certain way where you have these long questions with a lot of options, so they say you read the last line of the question first, look at the options, and then you come back from the top. What do you think about that? Is that okay? Is that
Yes. Yeah, so that's what I do. The most recent video that I have that is an instructional video, I have a gameplay video, which is not the one that you should look at. Look at the most recent step 1 lecture, because the first thing that I do is I talk about the taxonomy of questions and how to answer them. And I only give my strategy. Everybody has their own, but my strategy is I go straight to the question sentence, which is the one that has a question mark. And then I go to the answer choices to characterize. All I'm doing is I'm looking really glancing at the question sentence, and then I'm glancing at the question option choices. And then I go to the top and I really think deeply about the first sentence. So I think about the 32-year-old man. So this is a male and he's 32. He's not old enough to have diverticulitis. He's not very likely to have an MI yet. Because atherosclerosis takes a long time. So there's lots of things that he can't have. So I'm framing my mind to decide what this person is likely to have before I even go into it, because I kind of know what the question is, because I won't highlight the whole question sentence, but I'll highlight like caused by a mutation. And then I'll go to these answer choices. For example, this one, I would characterize this as things that you're born with real quick. So like congenital mutations. So this is not a mutation that happens while you're alive. This is a mutation that happens potentially in utero. Welcome, AJ. And so then you characterize this guy's 32. So what would present as a mutation in a 32-year-old is very different from what would present as a 1-year-old. So that's how I answer the question. Another thing that I do, to be completely honest with you, is on occasion, if I know that this question is one that I've seen before and there's certain information that I'm really looking for, on occasion I will go to the sentence before the question sentence. And if you're really late in your exam prep, you can make those decisions and start being strategic about, do I want to look at because look at this question. It says delayed hand grip and release bilaterally is a slow return to a smile. So we're having facial expression kind of things in the sentence before it. And Romberg's negative, so I wouldn't choose frataxin because that has to do with Friedreich's ataxia. So there's all sorts of things like that I do. So that's my strategy. I only give people that strategy like as my way of doing it because a lot of people do it differently who score higher than I do. I did well on step one, but it took me a while to prepare. But so is that a good answer to your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Okay, so a 32-year-old man presents to his primary care provider reporting weakness. So he recently noticed that he has difficulty letting go of a doorknob or releasing his hand after shaking hands with others. So this has something to do with his neuro thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so his past medical history is notable for diabetes, for which he takes metformin, so it's under control. He drinks 2 to 3 beers per day, uses marijuana occasionally, and works as a security guard. Family history is notable for an early cardiac death, so this is cardiovascular, probably.
Yeah.
His blood pressure is 130 by 85, so that's the first grade, right, for hypertension. Respiration is okay, pulse is okay. On exam, there is notable muscle atrophy in his hands. So again, neuronal issue. He has delayed hand grip release bilaterally and is slow to return from a smile to a neutral facial expression. His gait is normal, so that means it's not Parkinson's. Romberg's test is negative, so I've seen Romberg's test positive with those guys who got the occipital lobe issues. He also has frontal balding. That's quite normal, I guess, frontal balding. This patient's condition is caused by mutation, which are the following genes. Okay, so far I've not been able to land the diagnosis with what I've got.
Yeah.
So just a sec, let me just see. So shaking hands with others is tremors. The inability to release and all that, some kind of tremor. It's not chorea because he doesn't have any dancing or apoptosis kind of movements.
Yeah.
So let me look at the options. Maybe I can come down to that. So dystrophin is muscular atrophy, I think. That's like Becker's and Duchenne's.
Yes.
DMPK, I don't know what that is. SMN1, I don't know what that is. Frataxin is for Friedreich's ataxia. Friedreich's ataxia, those people don't live up to be 30. So it's not that. I don't know what DPC is.
Honestly,
So
I'm starting to think about Friedreich's ataxia because what are some of the symptoms of Friedreich's ataxia? Do you know? It's
in the name. Ataxia is like inability to control your mind.
Yeah. So do you know any spinal issues you might have?
In Friedreich's ataxia?
Yeah. This is not, this is a thing that, it's not very well known, but it's a good thing to know. It's, I think it shows up on NBMEs every once in a while, but you get scoliosis. And then you also have...
Okay, that's the twisting of the spinal cord in the S shape.
Yeah.
Okay.
Laterally, as opposed to kyphosis or lordosis, and then you have cardiovascular issues. So you can have, I think they're hearkening to this cardiac death and his father being genetic.
Okay, so it's like the trinucleotide repeat thing.
Yeah. So what kinds of dystrophy?
I could have gotten to that if they told me that his father died at a certain age and he got diagnosed with this at a younger age,
Yeah. I think Friedreich's ataxia, you're right, would present a lot sooner than 32. And the Romberg test being negative. So would you have cardiovascular issues in muscular dystrophy?
I'm not sure, but I don't think so. Because
Okay.
muscular dystrophy is one of them is a mutation, one of them is a deletion. That's where you have Becker's and that's where you have Duchenne's.
Yeah.
So these people, they have the inability to get off from a seated position. It's kind of
Yeah.
difficult for them to move around and all that. That's
Yeah.
as far as I remember. I don't remember there being any cardiovascular issue.
Yeah, you're talking about
I don't
Gower's
remember.
sign. Gower's sign is when you use your own legs to help you stand up
Yes.
because
So
your proximal muscle weakness. So these are great. You're coming up with a lot of knowledge and a lot of good thinking for these questions. So we're gonna talk about it, but why don't you choose an answer choice and we'll discuss it.
I mean, I think you've given it away for taxes.
Okay. So it might be. I'm actually thinking dystrophin with Becker's could be the answer because of the Romberg negativity, but we'll see. So what confidence do we want to use?
Well, I don't think it's Becker's because, I mean, he would have clearly mentioned the Gauss sign. I mean, that's how it is.
Yeah.
It's not like they hide the symptoms or something. So.
Yeah. And he has tremor, which is a neurological finding. It can be that when you're weak, you kind of tremble a little bit. And he has almost myasthenia gravis type, distal extremity weakness and things like that. He's describing hands, feet, and neck.
Yes.
And so usually frataxin would affect the cerebellum, which would give you kind of nystagmus and things like that, and coordination issues. But difficulty letting go of a doorknob, I think, is a because it's saying difficulty letting go of the doorknob. Then you're talking about having kind of spastic kind of contraction of the muscles in your hand. So I'm a little bit confused by this question, but so we'll talk about it.
Wait. He did mention his family is notable for an early cardiac death in his father. The early is like the buzzword there.
Yeah.
That's the buzzword. So it's a tried repeat and it's frataxin.
Okay, all right. So do you want to go green or yellow? Green? All right, let's do it. Okay, so it's DMPK. All right. So let's look at it. So myotonic dystrophy.
Oh, wait, what is DMPK?
Myotonic dystrophy is a I think this is the one that is mitochondrially so you get it from mitochondrial DNA. Is that right?
He said his father died early. So that wouldn't be mitochondrial DNA, that because the mitochondria is the mother's inheritance.
Yeah, you're right. So what is?
But he said his father died early. So
if you guys want to say in the chat what the mitochondrial one that I'm thinking of is, but this is myotonic dystrophy, which is, you're right. So atrophy of the type 1 muscle fiber, DMPK gene leads to abnormal myotonin protein kinase, so this is like this is a frontal balding is a characteristic of myotonic dystrophy. Interesting. And it's presenting in his third decade of his life. So it's one of the trinucleotide. That's right. It's one of the trinucleotide. I knew it was one of. So do you know the trinucleotide repeat disorders? This is a good learning point. Is you have Huntington's.
Yeah, you have Huntington's, you have Friedrich's, and I don't know. I knew Huntington's for sure.
Myotonic dystrophy, and you have GAA, I believe, is the repeat for Friedreich's ataxia, I believe.
Isn't that Huntington's?
And then CTG is myotonic dystrophy. Yeah. And so inability to relax the hand grip. I think this is a very high yield point. Inability to relax the hand grip is myotonia. So if you see that, then you really can't choose Friedreich's ataxia because it's a coordination issue. So I was looking at that going like, I it's not right as rain for me. I'm starting to get doubts, but I don't have a good answer choice to choose because dystrophin would not be as neurological as these findings suggest. You would never with a neural muscular junction issue have a spastic situation where you're not able to release the doorknob. You know what I mean? So this is a hard question. I think this is a very hard question. You did very admirably in terms of giving reasons for your answer choices, and I'm pretty sure I would have gotten this wrong along with you. So, I'm certain of it. Becker's muscular dystrophy is dystrophin. Yeah, they're trying to hearken to Becker's because it's later presenting. And then you really want to think about mitochondrial iron balance for frataxin's gene, and frataxin gene is associated with Friedreich's ataxia. And then SMN1 is a gene.
I did read somewhere that Friedreich's ataxia is incompatible with life and the kids die early.
Yeah.
Something like that. So that's why initial stages I eliminated it, but then looking at certain other options, then I came back to it. So.
Yeah. It's pretty bad. Scoliosis, and you get dilated cardiomyopathy, I believe. You can have sudden cardiac death. So that's it's a great question because the differential is really obscure, but also very good. So I think that was probably written by a neurologist. But so Rowenda, do we have some people join? Is AJ here?
Yes. Hi, AJ.
AJ, would you like to do a question? Are you with us? So did anybody else join? I think somebody else joined while we were chatting, but I wasn't sure. They might have left as well. Would be next in line? Would it be us going again? Rowenda, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
Shala, would you like?
Yeah, Chala, are you still here?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try another. Let's try another if you'd like. Would you like to read or should I? Can you see this guy? I'll read for you, and when you join in, let me know. 20-year-old Caucasian male presents. So I'm going to read it the way that I just suggested. So I'm going to read the question sentence. So which of the following would you expect to find in this patient? Okay, yeah. So you want to read? I got it.
I'm not seeing the question. Could you please read it?
Yeah, I'll read it.
I'm not seeing it. It's not.
So a 20-year-old Caucasian male presents with recurrent nosebleeds. So I know that this is going to be something to do with the kidneys here. 20-year-old. So Ume's joining again. 20-year-old Caucasian male presents with recurrent nosebleeds. So complete history reveals that the father died in his 40s after an intracranial hemorrhage.
It didn't.
And 2 of his father's 5 siblings have also had recurrent nosebleeds. So really runs in the family here. So nosebleeds. All right. So what are you thinking about? So the first thing to notice is that there's this disorder called Weber-Wendu, which causes like AVNs, which are arteriovenous malformations, and it makes it very easy for your nosebleed, especially if you put your finger in your nose when you're little, or if you just having Osler-Weber-Wendu syndrome. Would be a cause of recurrent familially seen nosebleeds. I think it's even autosomal dominant, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure about that. I think that might be autosomal dominant. So that's why you would see a lot of males, not just males, but males and females who would have the disorder, because if it's autosomal and it's dominant, most of the offspring are going to have that genetic characteristic. So that's what I'm thinking about when I read this answer choice. But there's lots of things that could cause you to have increased nose bleeding, for example, hemophilia or something like that. So Chala, are you still here? So Ume, do you want to give this a shot as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you read it yet? I read it out loud, but
A 20-year-old Caucasian male presents with recurrent nosebleeds. Complete history reveals his father's death in 40s after an intracranial hemorrhage, and two of his father's 5 siblings had recurrent nosebleeds. Which of the following would you expect to find in this patient?
yeah. So what are you thinking about?
So, venous malformation, vestibular hemostoma, no. Renal cell carcinoma, no. Vestibular schwannoma. I think I will go for E.
Yeah. I think this is Osler-Weber-Rendu, but I could be wrong. There's another name for Osler-Weber-Rendu that starts with hemorrhaginous. So which confidence level would you want to choose?
I will go for E. Green.
Okay. So I think it's hemorrhaginous mucocutaneous. We'll see what the name is, but I think you're absolutely right here. So let's look at this one. So if you look at the illustration, this is Osler-Weber-Rendu, where you have like elution of a lot of small vessels that are getting dilated, and you have a ton of nosebleeds. You have arteriovenous malformations in your brain, which can cause intracranial bleeding, intracranial pressure, and then you have sudden death from what is effectively a hemorrhagic stroke. So this is Osler-Weber-Rendu syndrome.
Osteorenal syndrome.
Yeah, Osler-Weber-Rendu, yeah. And then it's hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasias.
Yeah.
You'd see a lot of telangiectasias on the skin.
Yeah, I've seen the picture.
Yeah, and it's good to memorize all of the autosomal dominant. So the way that you remember what is autosomal recessive is you just memorize all the autosomal dominant, which there's a lot fewer of them. And that's a good way to do it. So you just memorize all the autosomal dominant. What I do is I draw a picture with all the names or the acronyms for the names, and then I try to remember the picture and draw out the picture easily so I remember all the autosomal dominant disorders. It's a funny way to do it, but that's how I do it. So I was able to remember it here today, and it's been a long time since I took this exam, but I remember that picture that I used to draw. And you get sudden death, stroke, pulmonary hemorrhage, and you can even have them in the liver. These arteriovenous malformations, you can also have them in the liver or the brain. And so this is a really good one. They also pulmonarily happen. So you can have problems breathing and pulmonary issues as well. So that's a great question. Thank you, Ume. I think you just basically knew the answer right away. Has everybody gotten to answer a question so far? I think we've gotten. Has everybody gotten answered 2 questions so far?
2 questions.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So I'm going to move this way. I'm going to move this way again, and we're out of action points. So I'm going to give us some energy and just move around the map just to show you guys what it's like. So if I were to kick this spider, so basically what happened is either I would die, or I would progress to the next stage, and it would tell me how many monsters I had killed, and I might be able to kill myself. I'm not sure if this model has a suicide button yet, which is to say for the character to die. But I quit. So if I quit, I can go to the game review section of the game. I can go to game logs, and it's a little buggy. So it's giving us like a breakdown for each stage. So today we have a bunch of breakdowns for a bunch of different questions. But more recently, on April 7th, we had this distribution of questions. And we had, let's go back to this signaling pathway, because I think that's a good question. So ordinarily, it would remember which things I had highlighted from the question, which we'll be implementing soon. And then, if you remember, it should have the highlights from when we discussed it, and that will be implemented soon. So you can review how long it took you. It took us 410 seconds. It should take you 90 seconds per question. It tells you what other people have answered in the past in terms of how correct they were on this answer choice, and you get an explanation here. Our QBank is going to be changing. This is just a temporary QBank until we can institute our own questions, which are going to be very high quality, I can tell you, like extremely high quality with very good images and everything. So we're very proud of that, and that's coming out soon. You'll also be able to play this multiplayer. So if you know somebody else from the Zoom meeting and you want to talk to them in the comments section, you can make a comment saying, I'm about to play the game multiplayer. Come out and meet me in a multiplayer game at this time. We also have a Discord on the website, and we have a YouTube channel to watch this video, which I'll be uploading today. Also, Rowenda, if you could send that YouTube video to the group again, I'll put it in the video description. And you guys can go to a video that features our channel. If you guys would like, comment, and subscribe to some of the videos on my YouTube channel, it'd be very helpful. And I do these questions for free, and I'll be doing them for the foreseeable future. And I never ask for any donations or anything like that. But if you do donate above $5, you can gain access to the game and play it. We launch, and so that's one of the rewards for donating over $5 on the website. I just want to thank you guys for coming. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact Rowenda or contact me through Discord. If there are content questions, you want to talk about USMLE content, I can answer some questions there. And then also, if you want to get private tutoring, we have that option as well. I'm even willing to do a free session for online tutoring if we get enough people. If the tutoring session is free, I record it so that I can post it. So I won't post anything embarrassing if during the session, the video turns on or something. But I usually will post the session just with the content and what we're going over, so people can benefit from it in the future. So thank you so much for coming, and thank Rowenda if you get a chance for organizing the meeting. So I'll see you guys next week or this week if we get enough people. Does that sound good?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank
Bye.
you.